Thanks very much, Mark. Morning, everyone. Indeed, good to see that crowd control works. So you guys are the committed ones, so I really appreciate it. It's good to be here this morning. It's good to be here at Stock Expo in general. I think everybody happy to be physically together, and last night was a very nice night. It's enjoyable. I forgot to actually play the casino, so I still have my vouchers. Right, as part of Advario, presenting today, my title is Change as Far as the Eye Can See. Now, I felt that was appropriate. Obviously, with the subject of the conference, Future Delivered, very much taking a future focus. That's what we do as well. So the future ahead of us, there will be a lot of change. There are some uncertainties. But I'd also like to touch a little bit on where we are today. And I'd actually like to take a very brief look back. I'm not a big history man, but I do think after 2 years of not being together physically, I think it's worth taking a bit of a reflection. So, COVID-19, 2020, 2022. I think a few challenges and rewards. Look, in the storage industry, and I always say it to our customers, we're not in the business of high peaks of profiting from massive market shifts like some of our customers or traders are, etc. But we also don't experience the deep depths if things go a bit wrong. We're in a pretty steady business, and we like that. So I think a bit of a statement, if we get our location right, if we get our business model right, and if we have a proper spread, then our business is pretty resilient. And I think over the last years, it's actually proven because a lot of financial investors have stepped into our business because they like that aspect of it. So what have we seen? COVID-19, here we stand today, we're all together. It seems like quite a long time ago, but we're actually not out of it yet in the world. But even at our terminals, if someone has COVID, it has implications. It has implications for our operation. So from that angle, it's still here, but I think thinking back about 2.5 years, myself, I was based in Singapore, but working in Europe. Singapore was going into lockdown. I had all these complications getting into Europe, and then by the time I was in Europe, Singapore was opening up, and Europe was closing down, and I had to sort of maneuver myself in between quarantines left and right, and that was only the beginning. And after that, it was a real challenge. But what did the markets do? Actually, for us, especially for those that were in the, that had anything that resembled a tank and that could store oil, was in good spirits, because there was a huge contango heading our way. We just didn't know how big it was. And for example, we've got a very large crude terminal as oil tanking in those days in Saldanha, and that thing came on stream just at the right time, and demand was there. And I can remember with my colleague Sjoerd thinking, okay, how do we maneuver here, and how do we maximize actually our position? What was a real differentiator, which was really, really exceptional, was WTI being offered at negatives on the front month. I don't know, anyone here in that business, I think that WhatsApp went around the world because it was an exceptional, never seen before situation. But anyway, contango, call it super contango. We had to be disciplined in contracting, but we locked it in at very nice rates. And I think for the years 2020, half 2021, no complaints on any of our side. What did that mean for chemicals? Because slightly closer to consumer markets, obviously chemicals, pretty resilient. If we look here, transportation, textiles, construction, industrial are projected here at negatives, but relatively small, I think, in light of half the world being in lockdown and consumer packaging being in a plus. Now, textiles, I think these are average, right? And not across the board and over time. So don't pin yourself down on them too much. I think in general, consumer sentiment was extremely high. In spite of the situation we were in, people were spending like there's no tomorrow. We couldn't spend on travel and entertainment, but people redirecting their spend towards consumer buying, goods, online, etc. And therefore, speaking to our chemical customers, no real complaints. Automotive was down, but if you had a proper portfolio of products, you didn't have too many complaints in light of the situation the world was actually in. What else did we have? Oh, sorry. Exceptional situation in Texas. Around February 21, Texas went into a complete freeze-over, which is an environmental phenomenon which is not standard. It might be a bit more in the future, but it was exceptional, certainly in those days. And what did that mean? It meant that about 80–90% of Texas production went into shutdown. These guys couldn't produce anymore. Serious tightness in the market. Flows to Europe dried up, and Europe actually reached tank bottoms in certain product categories and needed to get flows from elsewhere redirect. So in the US, people were scrambling to make sure that their equipment didn't fall off the tanks because it was frozen and brittle. And in Europe, I can remember that we actually had to deal with empty tanks and vapor controls, which we had never seen before in certain products like acrylics, etc. So scrubbers reaching full capacity, operational challenges as such. But speaking to, again, our chemical customers, last week I was in the US, some of them said that 2021 has been their best year ever. So it just shows it. This is a tight market. You can demand premiums on your product, but it's not that alone. I think just consumer sentiment, economy is faring really well. We see the stock prices of stock markets actually going pretty confidently up over the past years. So from that angle, not too many complaints. But for us as a business, no complaints either, other than I think it's remarkable how our people and staff and organization has actually maneuvered through the COVID period. I think we play an extremely critical role in the value chain. We obviously need to ensure security of energy to end markets, but also chemicals to the consumer markets and manufacturing. And it was a real scramble. I think precautionary efforts, organizational efforts throughout the world have been nothing less than remarkable because we haven't had any impact on delivering our service to our customers. And I'm sure that for those here, in whatever business form you're in, it was probably the same, but the situation of a few people getting COVID and you had to send 20, 30 people home was a real challenge. Same goes for projects. We have projects around the world, obviously with a lot of contractors, and being able to deliver on these projects. Quarantines here in Europe, many contractors from, for example, Eastern Europe, everybody had to go home. You had to see when you could get these people back. So we had various projects running, but there's two which I would like to especially highlight, because even during COVID, we did deliver two very big babies, which is these two fantastic tanks. They're not painted yet, but that's in the works right now. The one on the left is a butane tank, and the one on the right is a propane tank. And these are in Antwerp. These are two of the largest tanks for propane and butane in Europe. So 135,000 cubes each. Very sophisticated infrastructure, very complex to build. Takes 3 years. And especially the second one, which the brunt of its construction was during the COVID period, actually remarkable. And hats off to our teams there, because they delivered these tanks within budget, on time, and with zero lost time injuries. So here you see a bit of equipment from the last tank. Quite impressive, I think. It's always great to walk around there. You see all these, nice shiny pieces of equipment and pipes and everything that comes with it. And the best thing is it all works. So we've started it up very, very smoothly, and this tank is linked up to a PDH plant and feeds the plant already. So these things, in spite of the situations, very nice. Now, where are we today? It's been discussed quite a bit. It's a remarkable situation where we're in now, because actually coming to the end of COVID, we thought, right, this is all a little bit behind us. We haven't had too much impact on our economies. Our business has fared pretty well. Let's get out of COVID and let's look forward. Obviously, not just in relation to the traditional business, but also in relation to the whole energy transition and everything that is required for it. But two things have happened. China decided to go into serious lockdown, and with that we have a serious bottleneck in the supply chain of goods, but also of material, equipment, etc. I think everything that we order is delayed. And the second is obviously the Russia-Ukraine conflict. This is a huge unforeseen. I don't think any one of us would have seen this coming in this magnitude, but it has had an instrumental impact to markets in general, especially the energy market. There's a serious scramble for energy security in Europe, obviously around LNG. Gas prices have gone through the roof. Oil prices were already quite high. There was a backwardation, which is never good for our business, but prices are extremely steep, and that's where we are today. The scramble for energy security on the gas side is a complex one, because gas infrastructure is not built easily. It's quite frustrating. There would have been ample time to get it in place, but it's now a scramble, and we have to see how it works. And looking at LNG, especially in North Germany, getting it in place, there have been allocations of FSUs, but now the big question is, okay, do we build on-land storage for LNG, or do we go straight into the low-carbon fuels as a long-term solution? High oil prices, what do we see actually? We see in the US production coming up. So production typically in the OPEC countries, but the US as well. I think Permian has had its highest output now since ever. So it's up to about 8.8 million barrels per day, 142,000 barrels higher than it was previously. So it's encouraging for production. Those crude products and the NGLs obviously need to find a home. The previous wave, which was there in the US, resulted in quite a bit of development on the petchem side, but also NGLs being exported to elsewhere in the world. But the reality is, and if we look at that little green line, the incredible increase in energy prices, which affects our business because energy is a big aspect of our operating cost. The question is whether we can pass that on to our customers, and our customers can reflect that back into the price of their goods. The higher energy prices is already showing its toll on inflation, and inflation is going through the roof. I think consumer price index in certain European countries, but US as well, reaching double digits, which is not good. But actually inflation on equipment is way, way more. And that's a bit concerning if project costs become seriously expensive, whether the market can absorb it and reflect that back into their business model. And the big question is, how long will it take, right? If we can wait 1 year, fine. But if it takes 5 years of inflation, then we have a problem. Central banks, governments are trying to taper it with interest increases. But the question is, will it be sufficient? Because the scramble which is there in Europe is exceptional. I think the other thing which we do see more specifically in our business is the European Union and the US will most likely, if they haven't already, embargo Russian oil flows. So what does that mean for us? Maybe a good thing if you've got oil assets, that it would direct oil assets in a different flow, for which we are required again. Our business, again, is extremely valuable in the energy value chain in getting the products to end destinations. So that could be a good one for us in light of the pretty dramatic circumstances, I would say. On the chemical side, what we also see, we actually do see higher demand for storage, but that's predominantly just because markets are a bit in jitters, and people like to buy some security and rather have that than face the unknown. Stock markets are heading down, so we need to look not to go into depression, but we might be looking at a recession, which from a growth perspective is not great, because indeed you see governments, economies, they're looking for energy security on short notice, and it was discussed already yesterday or the day before that will go at the expense of the priority of the energy transition. So people are falling back on coal, traditional fuels, and again, at the expense of where the focus needs to be on the energy transition. So that's where we are a little bit on this one. So two serious factors which might have a structural impact are caused, in all fairness, by two people. So these are unforeseen, right? So China into lockdown, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, two people, and we're in the situation where we are today. Now, we as a company didn't really foresee this, but what we did look at is obviously a couple of mega trends. So the global trends shaping our industry today, and these things are not entirely exceptional. So climate change requires urgent action. I think climate change, we all know it's here. Right now, heading into summer, we can already see it. You know, in Spain, southern Spain, temperatures are going through the roof already in May, which is exceptional. I think in Germany, you guys had a tornado which was stronger than ever before, which is exceptional. I think the forest fires which are coming our way over the summer, which we see now every summer, it just all says it. This picture here is 2015. You can see on the top is a measurement of a glacier, which that glacier is all the way in the back. So in 7 years, that thing has deteriorated by that much. And there's way more poles. You can just see how quickly it's all receding. So climate change is here, and we need to take action. So markets are shifting. I think we've seen that as well. So electrification very much growing, and I think that's a nice development. Obviously, certain economies need to take a front runner role on here. Others will follow, but electrification on its own is not sufficient. So we need low carbon fuels for heavy industry, for heavy transportation, for power, aviation as such. So the low carbon fuels is a must, and that's what we need to work towards. And then the last is ESG, imperative for doing business. Again, also here at the conference, it's been spoken about quite a bit. In the past, ESG, we would have a few pages in our annual report. That doesn't work anymore. We need to have full sustainability reports. We need to have proper actions. We need to show and deliver on our promises. And it's not only that you see it from, for example, banks that have scorings on where you are in your ESG program and how they'll fund you, whether they'll fund you or not, or what the interest rates is that they'll apply. It's also from shareholders, it's investors. We see activist investors, but we also see employees actually questioning their employers and asking, hey guys, what are you doing? Can we see some action? And if you can't show your action, I'm not sure you're the employer for me. So ESG is extremely important, and these three things in general were fundamental to the developments which we went through as an organization. So in spite of, on top of all the challenges and changes that were there in the environment, we had some organizational changes as well. So we've been keeping ourselves busy. We went through our own transition. And for those that had the opportunity to see our brand launch, if not, we are Advario. So for those that don't know Advario is a new company which is a carve-out from oil tanking. For those that don't know oil tanking, I can't say much more there. We've been in business for a long time in the storage industry, so if you don't know us, then Shame on you. But Advario is a evolvement of what we see in our environment, but also it's not a reaction to our environment. It's also an embedded drive from our shareholders. So we're committed to actually positioning ourselves in the market as we do. So I'll come to that in a moment. So what is Advario? We're still a leading global player in the industry. So carve out from oil tanking, as I mentioned. We've taken 13 of our prime terminals out of the oil tanking portfolio into this new company with a new name and with a new and dedicated leadership team with its own governance, with its own strategy. And oil tanking traditionally had its headquarters in Hamburg. We will be moving our headquarters here in Rotterdam to be close to industry, close to our terminals in Antwerp, and as such, very, very present. Now, as mentioned, we've got 13 terminals. It's a global spread in the key hubs of the world. We've got 1,200 employees, 8 million cubes of capacity, and we handle over 50 million tons of product. In our portfolio, we still have oil products, we have chemicals and gases. And we will still serve our oil customers. Service is obviously key in our case, but going forward, we want to grow, and we want to grow in chemicals, gas, and the energy transition. So I won't go on too much about it, but very briefly on our strategy. There, actually, we want to grow our company ambitiously. So we've really carved the company out. We've taken all the expertise that we have, and with a very clear focus on where we want to grow and how we want to grow. From the existing assets, we want to improve our performance, and all of that within a sustainability leadership framework. So we want to double our business by 2030. Our growth is, again, chemicals, gas, the energy transition, so low carbon fuels. We want to be net zero by 2040. That's easily said. We've obviously got all kinds of programs in how we can improve our emissions, or reduce our emissions. But what we're working on right now is a very active program in our terminals in Singapore to actually really define the roadmap with concrete actions, so that it's not 2040, but that every time frame we will have actions that show that we can improve. And that will take investment. But again, that's about shareholder commitment. And we are a family company, and in that sense, family feels strong about this, and therefore we have a certain liberty to be able to invest where we think is best. And then a material share of renewable revenues. So as mentioned, we've got a portfolio. There's still oil, chemicals, and gas in there. The oil, we will serve our oil customers as we have always done, but we will also look at how can we transition some of our conventional fuels into renewable fuels. And we'll do this in coordination with our customers very well. And actually, on this one, I think within a month or something, we should have a nice announcement coming up. And on the other one, actually, I would have wanted to announce something today, but we just didn't make it. I think it takes another couple of weeks. But as mentioned, we've got 13 terminals around the world, 13 locations. We actually, quite shortly, will be able to stick number 14 to it. Key enablers is always people, safety. If we don't do it safely, we can't, we don't do it. If we can't do it ethically, we won't do it. People, culture, extremely important, but also outward focus, market focus, very, very important in reaching our strategic goals. So we have a big ambition, and that ambition we also certainly want to apply to the energy transition. So that all as a bit of a history and a bit of intro, and now looking forward. Obviously, the energy transition, as it was mentioned also, there's a portfolio of products, right? Biofuels, very much a developing product. We see biorefineries being established left and right. We have the experience of handling the full range of biofuels. Segregation is obviously extremely important. And we see those predominantly being able to serve those within our within our existing facilities. We'd happily invest in those for wherever a new refinery is being set up, but in principle, those are pretty straightforward investments, maybe some tweaking to your assets, but biorefineries you can serve. We've obviously got LNG. Is LNG a transition fuel or not? Those are complex projects, very capital intensive, but we'll certainly look at those where the economic viability is there. Now, this picture here shows hydrogen imbalances 2040. Now, whether these numbers are spot on or not, because, for example, I read somewhere that the European Union said, look, we want to have 10 million tons of production and 10 million tons of import of pure hydrogen. Now, whether that's correct or not doesn't really matter. I think what this picture here shows is that there are going to be production locations and there are going to be consumption locations. And in those consumption locations, there will be some production as well. So, for example, renewable energy, electrolyzer, hydrogen straight into the pipeline and off to where it's consumed. We do not see a tremendous market for hydrogen storage. It's just a very complex product to store. Minus 260 degrees. The economics of it just, in our view, don't make a tremendous amount of sense. Nobody would do it if they didn't have to. So we'll come to it in a moment on how do we get to consumer markets. But production, where the sun shines, where the wind blows, where methane is available for SMR or carbon capture technology. So where do we see it? Obviously, Middle East, Australia, Latin America, and the US. Those places we see as production locations, and the main consumption locations is Europe, obviously, Northeast Asia, and Asia in general, but Northeast as a front runner, and then North America. So if you see here North America, relatively balanced. I do see North America as a high blue ammonia, blue hydrogen production country, but also consuming most of its product domestically. So what does that mean from a project perspective? I think this picture, maybe some of you will have seen it before, but there's an incredible amount of projects popping up left and right. And I think our industry is in a very, very strong position to enable the market and get that link between production and consumption. Now, 500 plus projects, large scale, small scale, and an investment of 700 billion required. And whether it's 700 billion or a trillion or more, it doesn't really matter. I think this sort of shows the picture which is there. Now, the key question is, there are a tremendous amount of people that says, look, I'm focusing very much on the production side. I found the opportunity. All I need is some, either some renewable power. I'll just put in an electrolyzer. I need a ammonia tank, and off I go. But the big question is, okay, where do you go? And actually, who's going to take it off? Off-takers are extremely important here, and those off-takers that take products, wherever they land it, how do they get it to end market? That's a key question. So I think this whole development is, and again, it's been mentioned, it's not a straight line. It's not a linear development. It's going to go a bit left and right. Why? Because markets are developing, regulation is developing, technology is developing, and therefore a lot of questions are up in the air. And I think the good thing is, by speaking to a lot of market players, people that are involved in this, and there's not always our traditional customers, but we see different players coming up with which we need to build relationships, understand their needs, etc., and see how we fit in. If we look at product slate, we've obviously got liquid organic hydrogen carriers, we have ammonia, we have solid hydrogen carriers, we have e-methanol, etc., e-fuels, and then, as mentioned, biofuels. For example, on the e-methanols, we have joined some consortia here in Antwerp. We are in a power to methanol consortia looking into methanol production, and we also joined one in Singapore for e-methanol production in Singapore. Those just two to be really close to market and to really understand how do the leaders in this world actually think, and how do they see the market evolve, and where can we play our part in enabling it. The other questions obviously are, if you've produced your ammonia and you've brought it, for example, to Europe, do you need to crack it or not? Depends on end consumer. So again, if it's going to be burned in a furnace, you could potentially just burn it as ammonia. Why crack it? If you're going to put it into shipping, you don't need to. Shipping industry, bunkering. In Singapore, we're very much looking into this as well. Will it be methanol? Will it be ammonia? Also there on timelines, how long will it take for ships to convert their engines to be able to run on these fuels? What are the slots on docks to be able to convert? What is the timing we're looking at? In Europe, same thing. Cracker technology, is that something we understand? We're certainly speaking to the market to understand it and see whether we actually need to broaden our expertise in the value chain. And then again is, what's the timing of technology? So is technology there today, or would you invest today and actually a couple of years down the line, you're uneconomical? Markets, development, consumers are not going to buy into transition fuels unless they're competitive or regulation says, guys, you need to do it. I think there are plenty of consumers that have a very big heart about the environment and where the world is heading. But when it comes to price, people become very particular and they go, no, maybe not today. We'll do that the next time, or we'll have my neighbor do it. So from that angle, price is going to be extremely important. So for example, green ammonia, hydrogen, landing versus blue. There's a big argument that blue will be the front runner and green will follow later. If we look at indeed customer portfolio players, you see a big difference there as well, where Europe, you see a lot of the power distribution companies playing a leading role in trying to develop this market and push it to push it forward, versus, for example, the US, where it's a mix, but you see a lot of entrepreneurs trying to get ammonia plants off the ground and seek financial backing, and off they go. Above ground storage, subsurface storage, which will come later. I think different concepts, all being driven by what economically makes the most sense. We have to deliver extremely complex infrastructure, but we have to do it in a very economical way and a functional way. That's what we always have done, but the complexity of the infrastructure is larger. So from that angle, again, we are quite excited about what's coming. I do think cost is going to be a huge factor in getting there. Governments are going to have to play their part. Risk is going to be, will need to be taken as markets are evolving, but it's about what do you believe in that future will be? How do you want to invest in it? Are you willing to take risk? Are you willing to take that risk with the right partners? And I think for us as a company, we see our role in that. We have the capability, and we bring 50 years of experience of building complex infrastructure. We have taken into Advario all our expertise from the oil tanking group. We have the experts. We've delivered. For example, we've operated ammonia for over 10 years in China. Right now, in Q1 next year, we'll actually be operating the largest ammonia tank in the world, as I understand it, in the US. And those projects and that capability is extremely valuable to be able to sit at the table and have a very constructive discussion with some of the leaders that are pushing this market forward. We have a global presence. We have a strategic shareholder, so our shareholders are committed to what we're doing. We don't take short-term approaches. We take a long-term. This is our business. This is what we do. And we have a true commitment to ESG. So we really want to make a difference there. We're putting all the effort in there. It will take investment, but that's where we are. And that's the nice thing about the shareholders that we have, is that that's what we can do. So we're future focused, like we all are, because that's where we're heading. And we look forward to actually embarking on this journey. We don't have all the answers. but we love talking to everybody and trying to put this puzzle together and see how we can make it work. We have great locations around the world. We have land. We have the capability. And it's a matter of, okay, guys, partnering up and actually taking some action now. So we look forward to partnering with our customers, with our peers, with governments, etc., and making the energy transition a success. So that's it from my side. Thanks very much.
Many thanks, Douglas. You kind of know that you're at Stock Expo when somebody can put up a photograph of some storage tanks and say, look at those beautiful tanks. Look, I found your presentation extremely interesting. Douglas, you're not joining us on the panel, I believe. So if there are any questions for Douglas at this stage. I may ask one just to get things going, and if that provokes other questions, that's great. If not, you're off the hook. I'm particularly on your last slide. I'm curious. As a storage business is, you're the meat in the sandwich in a way between the producer and the consumer. And I'm just wondering whether you can share with us some of the perspectives from some of your storage clients, whether you feel that in this emerging hydrogen economy is at the moment more producer push or consumer driven.
Thanks. It's consumer, we have to define consumer, right? So I think if it's end consumer, as in us individuals at a household, that market needs to be developed. So as I said again, look, we don't see hydrogen cars as a big development, but hydrogen as a heating fuel or whatever, that market needs to evolve. I think the front runners will be consumers as in the sense of industry. So big consumers of power, fossil fuels, furnaces, etc. Those guys, they have a vested interest in actually seeing this happen. So there's a lot of evolvement around carbon capture because that's a big priority. It's regulatory driven. That's where the focus is on the short term, but I think that will eventually transition into carbon capture, transition into clean fuels for that industry. That's your base. Once you have that established, you can go further into the market. Now, this is just me, right, a layman, and we look at the large-scale flows. But I do know, obviously, that there are developments on flow batteries. There's developments on different carriers, which are, to a certain extent, safer to get to end destination. If there's evolvement on that technology, and you can do it safely, the last mile, let's say, then those markets could evolve quite quickly. With our customers, or what we see in the market is we see our traditional customers taking it very seriously and investing and looking into it. But we also see a pretty broad scala of players that were not our traditional customers. And we're actually trying to get to know them and are getting to know them a lot better. It's really interesting to see their views on this development. And there we think we can play a critical role in bridging that part of the value chain.
Any questions at all? Many thanks again, Douglas. Thank you very much.